Let's get now, though, to this exclusive story broken to Andrew Clennell today regarding a shouting match between Nationals MP Llew O'Brien and Andrew Forrest on the subject of renewable energy. During the spat, it's believed the member for Wide Bay called Mr Forrest a charlatan and a snake oil salesman, with another particular word accompanying those sentences. I'm far too highbrow to say them. Andrew, maybe I just can't quite pull it off like you do.
Gutless pea, is that what you're talking about?
Perhaps. Interesting sort of moment. What feedback are you getting around what people have made of this, perhaps some of his colleagues?
Well, comments on the Sky News website, a lot of people say good on Llew O'Brien for standing up for farmers on renewable energy, but it was quite the moment. There were only two other MPs there, Canavan and David Gillespie. The other Nats had walked out of the room from this Twiggy Forrest briefing at that stage and apparently stood up with clenched fists. And that's what people in the Forrest camp are telling me, but it was calmed down. But he really had a shot at him. He really... it was quite the stouch. And Andrew Forrest has been around to all the major parties, even One Nation, trying to sell his view of the world, renewables, rolling out transmission. Obviously, he commercially benefits from that. Llew O'Brien feels he's just saying what his constituents would want him to say. You're just pulling out all those transmission lines over our farms. You've got wind farms everywhere. This is affecting people and you don't care. But to go as far as to say you're an effing snake oil salesman, that really is quite something.
Yeah, so reaction was that, I know a spokesman for Andrew Forrest saying Andrew was calm, professional in the meeting. There was high emotions from the Nats in Queensland who are clearly passionate. Ultimately, Andrew and the Nats want the same thing. What's best for regional Australia?
I'm not sure they want the same thing.
Maybe not the same way of getting there. The interesting part of this issue is renewables are becoming a bit of an issue in some of those large-scale projects live on where some of the solar and wind goes. There's some debates around offshore, and we haven't got firm proposals yet from the government, but some of the regions I'm sure do want part of these projects because they also do generate money, and some are put off by saying they're not in the right spots or they don't want them in their farm or whatever it might be. So it can potentially divide the Nats themselves, this issue.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, clearly for Llew O'Brien, this is going to play well with his constituents. He's going into bat for them. I think another interesting element of this renewables debate too is national security concerns, because ultimately the government's trying to meet a lot of its renewables targets at the moment, and they're getting all sorts of applications. And at the moment, I'm told within government, they're trying to weigh up allowing foreign investment in these types of projects.
Yes, there's some big international players coming in, and so as soon as you say it's a Chinese company, just attracts more headlines here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We saw the Grand Piper. He was on with Peter Credlin a few months ago. He was the person who led that renewables, anti-renewables on farms rally out the front. That is something that's resonating in a lot of regional and rural communities. It's not just a one-off issue. This is a huge issue across the regions, that transmission line question going through farms. But I think you're right to point out this dividing line. It's not just within the Nationals, it's within regional Australia. Because if you're a farmer, you've got a massive property, you might not necessarily live on that property. You might be an investor out of Melbourne or Sydney. There are lots of investors who have massive properties across the country where they will get paid a return on a wind turbine. I think from memory it was maybe $30,000 a year, could be more than that, every turbine. I think it is more than that. I'll double check that figure. But either way, there's a revenue stream. They don't live in the area. It's not an eyesore to them. It's a return on investment and not a great outlay. If you say, okay, you take that strip of our land, it seems a no-brainer from them. But if you're living on the farm next door and it is in your eyesight and you can hear it, then it becomes a massive issue.
It's a bit like coal seam gas, and the people most disliking of it were close to it but not actually benefiting from it. Speaking on the lawn a little while ago at that protest, there were some people that was sort of just climate change isn't real, renewables are pointless. But there were plenty that said, no, look, I want us to do something. I'm just worried about the way they're doing it or where they're putting it. And these can be some pretty big projects. I'm not surprised there's at least some consternation in some societies about having them there.
Well, the suggestion out of the Forrest camp to me today is the Nats themselves are divided over it. So that'd be interesting. But you can see why the coalition wants to talk about nuclear energy. Okay, it might be 10 years down the track, but it gets them away from committing to these renewables projects that Labor are so keen on, which affects the Nationals' constituency in a negative way.
Yeah, well, they're the ones where you can plug in, supposedly, in 10 years, we'll see, plug in nuclear where the coal is, and you sort of have minimal disruption. But
again, you bring back that whole NIMBY question, don't you? It's people are used to the coal-fired power stations. Labor will weaponise, excuse the pun, the nuclear question.
There are plenty of Nats saying,
for a pun?
yeah, put it in my electorate. It's a bit easier when it's theoretical, I guess, because they're saying that, yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But how many in the coalition would say that overall once there's a firm proposal, I guess?
Well, it's going to come down to, do you want wind farms or nuclear power stations? I think most people would say neither in your backyard.
Ted O'Brien the other day said he was open to having a nuclear modular reactor in his electorate.
Theoretically, didn't he? She used some word like theoretically, but it wouldn't stack up. But, you know.
Yeah.
In Coolum. Imagine when people in Coolum and
We remember what Joe...
It could be a nice little tourist visit to the nuclear power
Remember
site.
what Joe Hockey thought about wind farms?
No, what do
You'll
you
have to
think?
remind me.
Utterly hideous or offensive, I think he described them on his drive to Canberra. Anyway, I go through a bit of history there.